Welcome everybody. Hey, JJ here. You're watching Bull, Boom, Bear, Bust. It is May 18th, 2020. Welcome to one of the only channels on YouTube that have been warning people for 2 years now to prepare for an event, to prepare for a Black Swan event, which did happen. And what was it? Well, it was the unexpected sickness outbreak that flew out of nowhere. Now, many people expected an event, including most viewers on this channel. No one knew exactly what it was going to be. So over the years, just to go back in time a little bit, what we've been saying is to financially prepare for some sort of event. I put a lot of different options out there, not options, but a lot of different possibilities out there. It could have been a bank failure, which caused massive bank runs. It could have been some sort of compromise of the financial system where money just starts disappearing out of people's accounts, some sort of maybe an attack from the outside. And even though myself and a lot of my viewers here, we knew something was going to happen, I didn't hear anyone talking about this sickness outbreak that's been unfolding now for several months. But nonetheless, if you've been on this channel, you've been preparing, and I'm getting emails now every day, thanking me for people that are now better positioned because they have been preparing. Not everyone's been preparing, but people that just didn't see this, what I talk about, they didn't see it as just some sort of fear mongering. People were preparing, and again, I do get emails, and I don't have time to respond to emails now that the channel's kind of grown a lot bigger than I expected. I'm getting a lot more messages than I expect, so I can respond to you through Patreon. It may not be right away when you ask me a question, but if you're a patron, I'll definitely always get back to you. If I see your message, I do check those messages at least once a week, so please allow me a few days. And I might even address it in a Patreon video. If you're at Patreon, just keep an eye out for uploads, and I'll direct message you too if you have any questions. Now, what I want to stress today, and we're going to talk about news here in a few minutes, but what I want to stress is continue to prepare. We're not out of the woods economically here in the United States and much of the globe, but especially the United States. The way that our corporations have been taking on debt, we're going to see a lot of corporate bankruptcies. Our previous report, actually, we just talked about Hertz Car Rental, and there's a fleet now of over 500,000 vehicles just sitting there, and we're going to see this across the board through many different industries. We're going to see companies that are not going to survive or not going to come back online because of the massive debt. And just like many people have not prepared for a shutdown or an economic downturn, most people didn't put away any savings, unfortunately. And the same is true for corporations. A lot of these corporations ran up massive debt. Interest rates were low. A lot of the profits went towards stock buybacks and insider bonuses and huge salaries for CEOs. So it's no surprise that even after only about 7 weeks now, since most of the country shut down, we're only about 7 weeks in, a lot of companies are looking at the possibility of bankruptcy, and a lot of companies are already in bankruptcy after only a couple months. And these are multi-million, multi-billion-dollar corporations in some cases. And even they were not prepared for just a month or two of being shut down and loss of revenue. All right. Now, the people that run these companies, the CEOs, the executives, they'll be fine. But all the employees, a lot of them were just living paycheck to paycheck, many of them working minimum wage, I'm quite sure. Not just Hertz, but many corporations. And it's going to be the little guy that gets hurt the most. Of course, this is going to be obvious because we know the big wealth disparity and the income gap between the upper level, the 1% versus the bottom 99%. We know most of the middle class has been living right hand to mouth and barely scraping by and in debt. Most people are in some sort of debt, no savings, sad but true. And I don't think we're out of the woods. There's a lot of optimism out there on certain channels, and especially the mainstream, talking about there's going to be a V-shaped recovery. We're just going to open back up and snap. Everybody's going to be back to work. Not at all true. Just think about, again, all the companies that are not going to open up. The companies that do open up, the lower customer base. There's not going to be many people. Let's say the restaurant industry, a lot less customers, a lot less tips for the servers, just a lot less volume in general across the board. You're going to see less customers everywhere, restaurants, stores. The car dealerships, I think car salespeople are going to really feel the blunt of this as well. Now, of course, the media people, the politicians, they're not going to tell you the truth. They don't want to cause panic because then they'll get blamed for the worst economic scare, that happens. If people start really freaking out, you can see this thing be 5-10 times worse than what it's already going to be, and it's already going to be pretty bad. One more thing real quick here before we get into the news. Why do we think there was going to be an event? Well, the monopoly men, the fiat money bankers, the market makers, the money manipulators that pull the string on this economy, they do not want people realizing how flawed the financial system is and how rigged and how manipulated it is. They do not want people to realize that. And of course, you see the front man out there, the president, he's telling everybody how great the economy was. The economy was not great. This manipulated economy was a very unjust, unfair system, and it actually hurts a lot more people than it helps. Yes, it will help a few people, the top 10%. They typically thrive in this type of system, and that's why you see some of the richest people in the world never really putting it out there of how unjust and how unfair the system is, how manipulated it is. So I think it's good for most people to listen to a fellow middle class person like myself instead of the multi-millionaires that you see on the news box there, the TV box. Right? A lot of those people, most of them are paid very, very well. Many multi-millionaires on the TV box telling you how great the economy is, how you should be all in on the stock market, never warning you about any possible correction or economic downturn. And that's where we come in. And there's some other good channels out there, but we think we've prepared you very well on this channel. So that's why we predicted some sort of event. What it does, it diverts the blame. Now it's all about the virus. It's all about the shutdown. It's all about the sickness. Before the sickness, they want you to believe there was no problems with the financial system. The debt, no problem. We can go into unlimited debt. And in fact, many of them will not even tell you about the debt. How many times have you heard the president talking about the debt? Well, I've never heard him talk about the debt. But he sure talked about how the stock market was going up. And that can be manipulated. So it's pretty obvious here to anyone paying attention. And let's take a look at some more real numbers today that tell you the real true state of the middle class, of the working class, and how most people were not prepared for this shutdown. Not only corporations, but people are feeling a lot of pain. We saw over 30 million new unemployed filings, and really the real number is closer to 50 million when you count all the people that are not a statistic as far as the government official numbers. Now, we talked about with most people barely scraping by in this inflationary environment, low wage environment, and how 1 in 4 people did not pay their rent in April. Well, we're well into May now. We're over halfway through the month. We've got some numbers here. It's gotten worse. If there was good news, I'd be glad to give it to you, but this further proves the vulnerability of the average U.S. consumer, the average renter in this case. Now, instead of 1 in 4 people not paying their rent, which is a quarter as it's outlined here, now it's bumped up to 31%. So now it's closer to 1 in 3 people now either didn't make their full payment or didn't make their rent payment at all in May. All right, now just to be clear, the economy is still mostly on shutdown, mostly on lockdown, quarantined. Some states are slowly starting to open up, so we may not see the true result until the June number comes out. We'll see what happens with the June rent payments. All right, so nearly 1 in 3 people, either 1, couldn't pay their rent, or 2, they could have, but they chose not to. And probably the people that chose not to is because they want to make sure they get food on the table for them and their family. So maybe there's a lot of people out there that pulled back on the rent to make sure they can pay their utilities and get something to eat. You never know. And also, millions of people got the stimulus check from the federal government, from the IRS. And even with the stimulus check, we see that it's gotten worse, the people not paying their rent. All right, so it looks like the stimulus check might have went towards other necessities and not so much towards rent for a big portion of the population here. And we see the chart here, still out of the same article here, apartmentlist.com. In April, 76% of people were able to make their full payment. And now it dropped down to 69%, with almost 1/3 of all people not making almost 1/3 of all people not making a payment or making a partial payment. And what it seems like is most of the population has just accepted not having anything in savings and accepting that just being in debt is the new normal. It's been implemented here throughout the decades that debt is the new normal. Now go back 40 or 50 years, debt was not that common. A lot of people had their homes paid off in far less than 30 years. Even my parents, they paid off their home in I think the early 90s, and they paid it off in like half the time. They bought it for dirt cheap, a couple decades before that, and they paid it off, I believe, in 20 years instead of 30 years. And that's not so common now. Now most people have to get some sort of loan and then take on additional loans and home equity lines of credit to pay off other debt, and credit cards with the high credit card rates, and just the overall cost of living is putting most people in some sort of debt. And it's a frog in the pot type of situation where it happens slowly over the years, and people slowly become accustomed to it. The frog in the pot, you turn up the heat, the frog doesn't jump out right away. It's just getting a little bit warmer and warmer and warmer every few minutes, and so ultimately the frog is boiled, and that's the consumer now. The consumer is being boiled in a pot of debt. And no savings. People were not encouraged to save because the interest rate that you get on your savings or your checking account or your CD, the return that you get is tiny. It's 1%, maybe 1.5% if you're lucky. And think about if we had real money. If we had real money that was actually backed by an asset, let's say it was gold backed, and let's say the banks couldn't create money out of nothing just by lending out money they don't have. The fractional reserve banking system allows that, and the fiat system allows that. That's why we call it the money monopoly men, the fiat bankers, the monopoly money men here that run things. If they weren't able to do that, then banks would have to incentivize people to put their money in the bank. They'd have to get higher rates of return. You'd have to see higher interest rates. The way it is now, banks don't need your money. They lend out money they don't have. They create it out of nothing. They just type it up on a screen. And this is the flawed system that I think most people are not aware of. And two, if they are aware of it, they're not talking about it. They're talking about other things, like what the Kardashians are arguing about. They're talking about the latest movies. They're talking about the latest divisive news topic that has people out there arguing the left versus the right paradigm, the false left to right paradigm, divide and conquer strategy. And no one talks about the real manipulation that's happening that's keeping so many people in debt. But information is power. But knowledge is power. I think the more you're aware of what's happening, the more you're going to be prepared. And I want to thank you for joining us here today and getting today's information and news. And what do you think about this rent situation where now it's closer to 1 in 3 people not paying the rent? Is it going to switch on in June and everybody's going to be back to normal? Or should we all prepare for a prolonged downturn, a prolonged economic decline that's going to have a lot of people seeing a lot of pain here? And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot more tent cities popping up in Southern California. It's just outrageous, all the tents that you see now driving around. But this is where we're at. Hope everybody's well and still on top of the game here, staying prepared. And I do hope to see you again here on the channel next time. Please give us a thumbs up if you like what we talk about, and hope to see you coming back for more. Everybody stay well. Bye for now.